Hello, friends. I'm very excited about today's topic. I have had a number of questions, inquiries about sustainability evaluation. It's my favorite topic. It's, for me, actually the only topic because it encompasses ultimately our entire reason for existing as a field, whether, whether you're looking at the point of accountability, learning, or advocacy, or any other kind of use for contributing to the design and the implementation and the decision making about an initiative. It's ultimately for life and the conditions of life and for well-being. So I'm really glad that sustainability is coming to the forefront as a concept. And at the same time, there's a little bit of, I think, a little bit of noise in the number of ways that sustainability is talked about and conceived of. It's not a bad thing. I just think that there's a lot of room for clarification. So I would like to give a 3-point answer to this question about how do we evaluate sustainability and what is some literature. I'm actually not going to get into literature references because you'll see the framing is so broad that I found as I've been thinking about this response that it really lends itself to a workshop, maybe a 1-2 day workshop with massively hyperlinked handouts that can be delved into depending on which aspect of sustainability, which framing of sustainability is relevant to a person's task at the time. But anyway, for general understanding of what I've been hearing anyway of framing, I'd like to do part one, thinking about sustainability, is thinking about the way we talk about sustainability of inputs versus activity implementation versus results. So if you conceive of just a basic old school logic chain, sometimes we talk about sustainability in terms of is your funding for your initiative diversified? How are you going to continue after your pilot ends? Are you going to be able to continue to find the resources to implement your activities? I think it would be interesting to also sort of refine that by looking at primary, secondary, and tertiary inputs that would have feedback loops to different stages of implementation. For example, if you have sustainable funding to hire staff, there might be a breakdown in the sustainability of the knowledge transfer because of how you're onboarding or doing a professional development of staff. You could have, really well prepared onboarded staff, but then at another stage, you could be burning them out or having other reasons why you can't retain the staff because of a toxic environment and so on. So that's all thoughts about how sustainably you can resource and provide yourself with what it takes to implement your activities in your intervention. Could be political support as well, anything like that. So, but then when we talk about sustainability of activities, we often talk about it in terms of the footprint, this environmental sustainability of the footprint. I would also argue the cultural sustainability of how we implement our activities. And I'll get into that in part 2 and 3 very super briefly. But so there are a lot of footprint calculators aiming to get to 100% less harmful. So 0 greenhouse gas emissions, circular economy, kind of looking at recycling and offsetting and mitigating, and also then a little bit of thought about, well, how can we implement our activities in a way that's nature positive or that's restorative or regenerative? And I would say also culturally regenerative as part of how we are looking at the sustainability impact on the human and natural systems in which the activities are implemented. And then thirdly, we talk about the sustainability of our results achievement. So results can also be broken down into different short, intermediate, long-term results, outputs, outcomes, impact, capacity change, behavior change, state change. There are different ways of framing it. But ultimately, as a chunk, when we talk about the sustainability of results, it's often talking about if you do an intervention and you go away and you come back a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, are you going to see evidence of the changes that you were able to document immediately after the intervention? So, so three very different reasons for investigating sustainability with implications for how you define the criteria and go about measuring or describing them, and also the potential utility of on design or decision making or behavior for the results, for the evidence that you generate through evaluating those perspectives on sustainability. The second thing that I think is really important to consider when we're talking about sustainability evaluation is anthropocentric value proposition for sustainability talks about an instrumental valuing of environmental sustainability, for example, looking at the dollar cost or social cost to environmental damage, centering the well-being of humans, seeing the Sustainable Development Goals that are biospheric as a basis to support social and economic Sustainable Development Goals, for example, or seeing biodiversity as a threshold in donut economics that we dare not exceed, just as there are other thresholds for ways that we need to manage the global commons, air, water, space, so on. Ultimately, what that communicates, though, when we talk that way, is that human beings are exceptional on Earth and have more right to natural systems, to help ourselves to natural systems and to benefit from the global commons than other species. That is a value system that is not a universal value system. That is a value system that is very connected to colonization and to the conquest and exploitation of flora, fauna, and, let's be honest, people, for the interests, for colonial interests, and that has been baked into capitalism. I realize it sounds hugely political. I actually don't feel like it is. I feel like it's just science at this point. But I just want to put it out there so that we can see and be self-aware of the ways that we are instrumentally valuing nature and conceiving ourselves as separate from nature in the way that we define stakeholders, rights holders, and thresholds for allocation of the global commons. So related to that, the third perspective that I'd like to talk about is when we are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we often frame it as social considerations, social equity considerations, social justice considerations. And we tend to exclude nature as rights holders or nature as a consideration when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, when I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I include biodiversity and diversity. I include interspecies equity in equity. I include the inclusion of biocentric and cosmocentric worldviews in the epistemological space that we either restrict or hold in how we conceive of and talk about human and non-human beings. For example, very, very simply, when we talk about ethics and we talk about our ethics towards all people, I advocate that we change that and we say all persons or all beings. So at least if we say all persons, then we're opening that up to an evaluand or an evaluator who respects the personhood of a river, for example, or the sentience of a forest. So then likewise, in terms of sustainability, sustainability is absolutely a cultural, a linguistic, a human concern. It's not just a natural systems concern, because we are at that point of indebtedness in our human activity, and we absolutely are at a point of imbalance where we are threatening the sustainability of everything that we know and love as humans, which we've experienced during this pandemic. So equity and sustainability, I would like us to frame them as equally relevant, both of those concepts equally relevant to both human and natural systems, and so that we can start to frame our collective well-being in a way that is not human exceptionalist and does not exclude people's worldviews who are not coming from a anthropocentric or human exceptionalist framing, but rather more of a biocentric, cosmocentric, or animist framing of stakeholders, rights holders, and just allocation of the commons. Thank you.